Hello, everybody. This is Mike Southern, and we're going to do a week one of a two-part gouache demo today, and I'll get to that in a moment as far as supplies and all that things go. But we are going to start our project today and finish it next week. So hopefully you can make it for both, and we'll have you sort of be able to catch up on anything that we don't do this week, next week. So don't panic when we don't have everything finished by the end of class today, because this is a two-parter. Okay, so let's get right into things. We're going to be working in gouache, and gouache is a water-based media, very similar to watercolor in the way that it's used, in that you just kind of activate it with some water. The main difference, though, is that you're able to get much more opaque passages in gouache than you are in watercolor. Watercolor is sort of splashy and transparent and all that sort of thing. But gouache has the ability, like acrylics, to come in after the fact and do heavier, more opaque passages. So we're really going to take advantage of that in this two-day one. So let me go over the supplies here really quick. And so here's our gouache supply list. The picture that I have there is of the actual set that I will be using. This is one that's available at Michael's. It's an Artist Loft brand set. And it's, I don't know, it's $10, $12 for, what is it? 12 colors. So it's really good, really affordable. And the quality is actually pretty good for it's sort of entry level, student level set of paints. But there's a lot out there. There's lots by different brands. Winsor Newton is another one. Talons, I think, has some. So there's all sorts out there. It doesn't really matter what brand you have. If you don't even have gouache is sort of a little bit more of an obscure medium. And if you only have watercolor, that also works equally well. Well, not equally well, but it works similarly, and you'll get the general idea. You just won't be able to do as much opaque work when you use watercolor. The other stuff that you're going to need is listed down below there. You're going to need a cotton rag or paper towels, masking tape, a container or two for water. I use two, but one will be fine. Watercolor brushes are the best bet, but acrylic and oil brushes will work in a pinch, and in some cases will work really well for different areas there. I see somebody holding something up there. Kylie was holding something up. Can't see what that says. What does it say? Designer's gouache. Yeah, those are great. You got it. Gouache, that's what you need. It's perfect. And then to paint on, you're going to need watercolor paper. And watercolor paper specifically is best, but you can use kind of a heavy stock sketch paper. But watercolor paper is designed specifically to hold a lot of water and to sort of withstand the repeated applications of a wet media. So watercolor is best. I'm particularly using Fabriano brand watercolor paper, and it's the size is 9x12, which is sort of a standard 3x4 format. But really any size will be okay. I will tell you that the image we're working on today, as you will see, is pretty complex. There's a lot going on. This is a photograph of the city of San Francisco that I took myself way back in the day when I was, well, way back in the day, like a couple years ago, before all this pandemic stuff hit. And I had about 5 or 6 that I was choosing from. I chose this one because it's got kind of an interesting composition. It's got a lot of really nice sort of subtle color variations and a lot of opportunity to use some of the gouache effects that we're going to use. This is all in reference to the size paper that you're going to be working on. So I would say the bigger that you can handle, the better, because there is a lot going on in this one. And it is a 2-weeker, so we're really going to kind of work this one over quite a bit. So that's the scene we're going to be working with. So without further ado, let's get right to it, shall we? All right. So here we are. Here's my setup. There's a few other things that I wanted to show you supply wise. I'm working on a disposable palette. These are, this is also a Michael's brand, Artist Loft brand, but they're really easy to find. They're basically like wax paper. If you have wax paper, it works great. You can also use sort of a big plastic palette. I'll just show you mine here. This is a big monstrosity here that opens up into two. You can see that it's been heavily used, but there's I don't know, 25, 30 different little trays for mixing up different colors. So if you've got something like this works fine, but you can go as simple as something like this. Something non-absorbent to put your colors on is kind of imperative for this, because you're going to be constantly inundating it with water. So, you know, make sure you're not doing this on a piece of cardboard or something that'll absorb the water and make a slushy mess, which we don't want. It's going to be messy enough without that. Okay, so first things first, we've got a lot of information to kind of get down. I am going to start with a quick pencil sketch here. And whenever I work in water media, I really want to make sure that I'm not overdoing it with the drawing. In other words, I'm not going to go through and draw every little window and then, no, maybe there's a puppy looking out of that window, that kind of stuff. We're not going to mess with that, the real heavy detail. I'm just going to get horizon line. I'm going to get that road slashing through that right side. I'm going to get the little island there in the middle. I think that's Treasure Island in San Francisco, if I remember correctly. And that's the bridge between Oakland and San Francisco. I'm going to get that tree and maybe a few of the foreground buildings just to sort of get myself oriented. But the first thing that I'm going to do with this one is I'm always looking for getting the most information down as quickly as I can. So in this case, that far horizon line is really kind of my starting point. So I'm just using a regular number, you know, HB pencil here, but a 2B pencil or anything like that is fine. If you want to use colored pencil, that works as well. So I'm just getting a little bit oriented here. Just going to sort of draw the basic undulating hills. That's the Berkeley Hills, if I'm not mistaken. Saw somebody was from Santa Rosa today, so you probably know the names of all these. All right, so there we go. The shoreline, I'm just going to put that right in there. And, you know, this is a landscape, and what we're looking at here, there's basically one big concept that occurs over and over again in landscape painting, and that's something called atmospheric perspective. And what that means is as things get further back in space, they tend to get lighter, and they tend to get more sort of in the middle as far as tones go. And it's also a way of dealing with the perspective. In other words, things are going to get smaller as they move further away in space. So, you know, this island, I don't know, is I don't know, 20 square acres or something like that, but it's really just a sort of a blip in the screen here. And I just like to look at it in terms of how much it takes proportionally as I work my way down. So like this is maybe a fifth of the way down from the top. And then this is just sort of a fraction of that. So I'm just kind of using a little sort of scale of proportions here. And I've kind of run into this big apartment building right here, or whatever that is, right in the middle of Treasure Island. So I'll just make that mark. And then right here is that main road. And it's almost a perfect, this is one of those classic San Francisco roads where it just cuts right through the center. And there's, what you can't see here is the road goes up that hill, and then it's kind of going, you know, it sort of bottoms out. So it's got this really weird curvature that makes it look like that road is almost the same size all the way down. Like in a normal situation, you'd probably have a road like that. But in San Francisco, where there's lots of ups and downs, it kind of flattens stuff like this out. There's a wonderful artist named Wayne Thiebaud who did a whole series, and Richard Diebenkorn to a lesser extent, who did a whole series of cityscapes with this kind of thing. And it looks like, you know, somebody took a big knife and kind of went right through the picture. And it's because these roads have that. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use a ruler. That's actually not cheating. I get people that, you know, when I was teaching classes at college, you know, they'd sort of look at me sideways when they got their ruler out and say, "Oh, is this cheating?" And it's like, no, it's not cheating. Drawing a hard line, hard straight line like that is difficult. So rulers are fine. All right, so there's that. Something like so. I'm going to come over here really quick to the tree and just looking where it kind of intersects that far side of the Berkeley Hills there, comes briefly through Treasure Island, comes down sort of into that middle ground and sort of a nice triangular shape. Not, you know, not drawing a Christmas tree with a, you know, this sort of stereotypical, just trying to get a little sense of where that is. This foreground stuff maybe comes down a little bit lower. So let's do that first. I'm just going to draw this, get my ruler again. Why mess around? I'll just put this sort of foreground, and also noticing where, as I draw this, where this line, if it went all the way up, where it would intersect in those background things that I've already established. So it looks like it comes up right about there, actually. Something like that. So I can just take that all the way over. Kind of drop that down. Now, I'm not worrying about the city planners of San Francisco getting back to me about an inaccurate drawing. So I'm not going to try and draw every single building and get everything right. I just want to get sort of the general lay of the land. Now, I'm just immediately looking at this. I see a big gap here that is not in the actual picture. And I think what's happening is my piece of paper is slightly longer than the picture up in the corner. So I'm just going to kind of go with that. And well, actually, what I'll do is I'll kind of double check it. I could have gridded this out earlier, and I've done a few grids to kind of keep track of where things are a little bit better. I think maybe this needs to flare out a little bit too. So I'll just do that. You can always do this while you're painting, but if you get a pretty good sense of where things are before you start painting, it generally is going to make your life a little bit less difficult. So I'm all about that. Life is hard enough without getting the drawing messed up before you even start. All right, there we go. This comes right through into there. What else? I'm thinking maybe, yeah, I've kind of extended things out a little bit. So this gap is, I think, just something, a little discrepancy. I actually had this edge of the tape kind of moved over a little bit, and I was like, well, maybe I could just do it right here. But I decided to kind of go with this because it is a problem that comes up. And I just wanted to sort of show you kind of how I've chosen to deal with it in this particular case. And I'm just going to put a few, I've got the basics here. I'm just going to put a few landmarks in here to give myself a little bit more information to go on. There's kind of a little stand of trees right in here. And there's a nice little diagonal line where the city skyline kind of comes up. So as you can see, this whole area, there's a lot more space in here because of my longer paper. So this is where I'm going to have to go, all right, I'm going to do a little urban renewal here and put a new set of condos right on the riverfront there. And just kind of make do with a little bit different. If somebody that lives in this spot in San Francisco were to look at our drawing, they'll probably get back to us about this and that. That's not quite correct, but we'll take our chances. And then up here, it's kind of a little bit, and I get my glasses while I'm looking at this. Yeah, there's a little bit of a deck right on top here. So I'll just put that in the foreground. This little bit here is kind of a nice little foreground detail that I think I'm going to include. A couple windows right there. So maybe just a couple windows here. If I wanted to get out my ruler, I probably could, but just sort of blocking things in. Things that my eye sees as I'm just looking at the picture, like, oh, that's really, really strong foreground information. I'll put that in. I can see that this sort of turns the corner here, comes over like that, and then turns the corner and goes that way. So any of that perspective stuff that I can see in the foreground, that's going to help, that's going to help the viewer's eye kind of move around. See, this is another nice, this is the sort of the edge of the harbor right here. So I'm going to be sure to put that in. There's a couple buildings right here. So for the time being, let's see if there's anything else that's really necessary at this stage. Maybe this big roof here. And I've kind of extended this a little bit wider too. All right. So I think in terms of what I need to get here, I've got the bulk of the information. I'm just going to have a look here. Looks like there's a little cross street. Nah, I don't really need to put that in. Okay, so I think I'm going to have to just sort of live with this. This is a little darker stand of trees that kind of peeks out from there. I've got the big hill there. Got this sort of little stand of trees over here. And I think that'll do. All right, so we're ready to paint, or at least I'm ready to paint. If you're still working on the drawing and you want to do that, that's fine. I would say this is probably more than enough to get started with. I probably could have, left some of the foreground details out, but I wanted to give us a little bit of a working model to paint over. Okay, so what I've got now is a, what is the number here? It's number 8. This is just sort of like a moppy brush, kind of a mid-range, mid-size one. You can see it's sort of longer than about twice as long as my fingernail, about half as wide. So it's a nice kind of middle of the road brush. And I'm just going to start with kind of a more wet into wet classic watercolor approach. And I'm just going to be very typical in terms of the way I'm going to lay these first few washes in. So I'm just going to take a little bit of, this is a cerulean blue over here. And let's see, it's kind of a warm sky. Maybe I'll put a little yellow, a little bit of yellow ochre and a little bit of the lemon yellow, yellow ochre, just to kind of warm it up, give it sort of more of a teal color like that. I'm just going to lay this wash in, maybe get a little bit more pigment. So right now, it's basically a kind of a classic watercolor application. I'm just doing a little wet into wet and really letting that water spread that paint around.
Hey, Mike, what color is this again?
So it's a mix of some colors. This is a cerulean blue hue, which is from that gouache. All of these are from that gouache, this gouache set. So this is cerulean blue, this one right here. And then I'm using a little bit of the lemon yellow, which is over here, and then a little bit of yellow ochre just to warm it up, give it a little bit more a sense of light to it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And honestly, I could probably just do this all through the hills here, but I'm just going to keep it up here. I don't think this is exactly the color that is in my picture. Kind of looks a little bit more forest fire haze than the actual picture. If I wanted to change it a little bit, I probably could right now. And if I wanted to kind of mute it, maybe I'll take a little bit of a brown, like a burnt sienna here. So I'll see how this looks. I'm just kind of mixing it with this cerulean blue. Just kind of mellowing it out a little bit. Looked slightly too intense. So just earth colors are good. Like if you've got a really intense color and you just kind of need to soften it up a little bit, earth colors are good for that. Yellow ochre, siennas, umbers, things like that. You can also take kind of the opposite end of the color wheel, like the opposite of green is red, the opposite of blue is orange, and that will sort of tone down any colors that you have. That's a little bit more green than we're probably actually dealing with, but it'll do for now. I'm going to work my way down here to this hillside here, this first hillside. Actually, what I might do is I will. I'm going to do it. Just going to get all of this and the island, Treasure Island there, all together. This is all background stuff. So if it kind of bleeds one into the other, that's fine because it's kind of back in space a little bit. And all of the colors do tend to have a little bit of consistency. They kind of bleed into each other kind of naturally just because of the way they work optically. All right, so I just did all of this, and now I'm going to use a different blue. I'm going to use this, I think it's, what is it? Prussian blue, which is frankly not my favorite color in the world. So it's a bit intense. So I'm going to mute it immediately with that brown. Something like that. You can also kind of gray it up and take a little black. Let's try that. I think this might work. Actually liking the way the black is reacting with it. So let's see how that works. Oh yeah, that's it. So basically what I did is I kind of made that kind of a blue black. And it was Prussian blue and a little bit of the brown, the sienna, and then a fair amount of black actually. And I'm trying to keep it away from the sky because I do want them to be somewhat distinct from each other. I don't want to bleed into each other too much. This is more of a gray blue. And again, I'm sort of using it in the typical watercolor way in that, sort of pre-wetting it, using a lot of washy approaches. And one of my waters is for sort of really doing the dirty work, so to speak, getting a lot of the paint from my brush off. And then this one I use more for, cleaning my brush fully and not getting any kind of outside colors into it. This color is not right for the island, but I have a plan. And it involves sort of this distinct use of gouache here. So we might not get to it this week, but I will make these two hills separate from each other eventually. To trust the process. All right. And you can see I'm kind of where I did not put water, I'm able to get a nice hard edge, like around these buildings and things like that. So that's another great advantage of both watercolor and gouache. You can really define hard edges pretty well. I'm just trying to get a series of shapes in the background established in these sort of preliminary runs. And I think this is probably drying a little bit more up top. So I'm going to start getting right along that edge a little bit. Actually think some of this gray blue that I've got here would probably help up here, but I'll leave it separate for the moment. Yeah, it seems to be holding its own, not bleeding too much into the upper atmosphere. There we go. Because at the end of all this shape here, this far hill, is very distinct from that. So I really want to keep them separate. This is going to need to go darker. So I'm going to just mix up some more of this and make it a little bit heavier. So a little bit less water, a little bit more pigment. And let's separate this one from this one now a little bit. I'll just put a little bit more in here. Still letting that water kind of run around a little bit. So building it up. I mean, is this the top of the tree? Yes, there it is. In watercolor, it's best to kind of work from lighter colors to darker colors. And whatever color you're working on, to kind of build it up a little bit slower. Like don't try and go for broke, in your first swipe, don't get, the densest blue gray that you can get and then just swipe it across there. If you're not sure of how dark or how light it needs to be, just probably start lighter than you think it's going to be. And then you can always add later. Although gouache does have the advantage of that opacity, sort of that you can't see through it. So you can always come back with some lighter or darker passages to kind of reinforce what you've already established. There we go. It's behaving pretty well, not bleeding too much. This one bled a little bit over here, but I'll clean that up. Sort of give you the first gouache unique feature here. All right. And remember, if you've got any questions as I'm working along here, feel free to ask. All right, so up here, you can notice it's sort of bled a little bit. Let me just get you a little bit of a close-up there. So right along here, it kind of bled from one area to another. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes it looks really nice. In this case, where I want this and this to be two distinct areas, I'm going to be a little bit more fine upon it. And I just want to sort of show you, I need to let it dry though. Let me see how damp it is. It's still pretty damp. I mean, you can always come in with a paper towel and just kind of work out that edge by kind of working reductively. That actually did a pretty good job. The other way you could do it is if you could come over and mix an opaque color like exactly like this and just kind of cover that up. I'm going to go with this because it really is the preferred way to work. You don't want to always come in with sort of these heavy-handed passages. So I'm going to try and embrace the watercolor part here, and that's a much better edge. And I think I'm just going to do that all the way across to sort of build a nice dark, blue-gray. I don't really do this a lot, mixing black in with my colors to kind of soften them up, but I'm kind of liking how that looks. Let me take that up a little bit more. So now I can kind of add a little bit of texture along the edge just by kind of moving it. Getting that sort of jagged eucalyptus trees and whatever else they got up in the Berkeley Hills. I know they got eucalyptus trees. That looks pretty good. All right, so we got a little bleeding happening here. If I wanted to get rid of that, I could kind of do the same thing. Just kind of take my paper towel, just kind of blot it out like that. There's some people that really like to just kind of embrace that kind of stuff whenever they can. I like to be selective about it, or else it kind of looks like you're looking at a painting through your watery eyes when you've got bad allergies or something and everything looks fuzzy. So I really want this edge to be kind of very sharp and defined. I mean, that always, in California, that's kind of one of the distinctions is you got these nice sort of discrepancies between a nice dark edge like this and a light, softer kind of in the distance atmosphere. All right, so I think I'm just going to let that sit for a while. And maybe what I'll do here, I'm going to go in with the water now, the little strip of water here. It's actually the whole bay. So now this is really tricky because you've got 1, 2, 3 very distinct areas, and they're all blue. So I've got to come up with 3 different tones of blue here. This one is a much more vibrant blue, a more intense blue. So I'm not going to use as much of that black with this one. So I'm going to take some of this cerulean blue, maybe a little bit of that Prussian blue. And I do want to soften it a little bit. But what do I want to soften it with? Maybe I'll go with a little red just to kind of purple it up a little bit. And it's not so much I'm trying to, and the thing you have to think about, and I think this is a mistake that a lot of people make, is they try to get the color exactly right. And you always have to remember that you're making a painting. So your responsibility is, if you have any responsibilities, is to make it interesting and to make it work as a painting. You do not have to get every color exactly right as it appears to you from your source material. It has to just work as a painting. So I'm just trying to get something that's a little bit more intense. So that's why I'm kind of going with a little bit of red here. And I'm just using that this red here, which is crimson red. So I'm taking crimson red and then that cerulean blue, and then just mixing it a little bit with the existing blue that I used here. And I'm going to not pre-wet it. And I really want, let me see how this works. So I kind of messed this up. I messed up my island. This should be water. This should be the bay here. Let's see if it's still wet. Oh, well, we're just going to have to go gouache on it. So I'm just going to do this part. I'll deal with that later. I'll do right here, this little bit. So I'm just going to knock in this bit. So this color, I think, actually works pretty well. It's much brighter than the other 2 blue variations, and I've kind of changed my edge a little bit. So I've done a little bit of editing of my drawing, which is really easy to kind of deal with. Let's see, maybe this goes a little bit further down. There we go. And this little pencil mark here is that I can see is not actually that big of a deal because I can come back later and erase it even through the the color that I've already put down. Now this little bit back here, this is a little bit lighter. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the same color, but I'm just going to use a little bit more water. I'm just going to kind of lighten it up. And I'm going to keep a little bit of a white line along there to just for my eye, just differentiate from the shore, because there's a lot of, you know, houses and kind of industrial dock stuff there that I will sort of integrate this little white bit here. Let's do a little close up. Close up on the dock. There we go. So I'll just pull a little bit of this up here. You don't always have to add from your palette. You can kind of take some stuff that's already on and just kind of piggyback on the color that I think works pretty well. And now I just want to make sure that I keep it the same color. Yeah, because this needs to come in through. Oh, actually, I think I did do it right. I just drew my line a little bit wrong. So that's going to be a much easier fix. So let's do. Good. Crisis averted. I can kind of bring this through here. There's Treasure Island. Is that right? Now I'll just do it like that. And this is part of the skyline there. All right. Again, the city managers of San Francisco don't mind at all. This has been permitted, all of this, all of these adjustments are perfectly legal. All right, so that's a little better. This is a little bit darker, so I'm just going to add a little more pigment in this area. There we go, that's nice. And so again, creating this nice crisp edge here because there's no water around this. Like if I were to put this up here earlier, it kind of would have bled everywhere. But we don't have that problem. I'll just take some more of this, kind of work it around. All right. So this in many ways was a really tricky sequence here. I still haven't made this a distinguishing shape, but I will soon enough. But this blue and what I'm going to end up doing here are three different, very closely related colors that are going to make up the bulk of this background. Basically the landscape part of it, as opposed to the cityscape. Okay, so let's go into here now because I think this is pretty dry. So I'm going to go in here and start to build up this a little bit more fully. And the way I'm going to do that is this one has a lot more earthy colors in it, sort of warm colors. So I'm just going to start maybe by adding a little bit of yellow ochre kind of selectively through here and using it a little bit heavier, putting a little bit of that blue. So this is where the atmospheric perspective stuff that I was talking about comes in. So when they say atmospheric perspective, that's exactly what it means, is the atmosphere creates a sense of space. So in other words, dust and sea foam and particulates in the air are between your eye right back here and way back there, and it's causing everything to kind of look a little fuzzy. So that's why I'm adding some of this gray blue to, let me just go back so you can see what I'm mixing up. There we go. So I'm taking this yellow and kind of mixing it with that gray. So it's a warmer color, and I'm going to try and just sort of add a few warmer passages in here just to sort of give it, maybe even go, let's see, let's be a little selective with it. And this is going to be, I think, where I end up using a little bit more opaque. Actually, I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to do some opaque stuff. We're going to go full gouache on it. So we're going to take that color and I'm going to add some white. And I'm really going thick here. This is probably a little earlier than I would normally want to do this, but I want to show it before we end today. So I'm going to maybe speed the process up a little bit. So I'm making kind of this milky brown color. So I'm taking white. I'm taking a little bit of that gray blue that we mixed up, taking a little bit of this sienna color. I think it's a burnt sienna. Yes, it is. So I'm really trying to match the color that's in here. And what I did, this is too dark. So what I'm trying to do is now just lighten it up and warm it up a little bit. And that's kind of, it's almost like cream in the coffee kind of thing. It just adds a little bit of creaminess to the color. I think I need more. Take that, maybe a little bit of that. This is yellow ochre. We'll see how this goes. Now I'm going to do this right along the shore. I don't want to get near that blue. That's still probably too wet. There we go. So I just added some more white to it. Let me get you closer up here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just letting that warmer, lighter color with all that white to sort of bleed into what I've already established. And I am going to go along here, but I'm going to really make an effort to keep it away from that blue. Although it actually feels really dry right now, so I think I'll be fine. So this is more like acrylic painting in the sense that it's heavy, that it's opaque, and it's not something you would typically do in watercolor. So I kind of like how that works. I'm just going to add a little bit of, some bare earth kind of creeping out here. So these are the lighter areas, the more exposed ground. And what I'm going to do next, that seems pretty good. But that white sort of lightens it up, softens it up a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of all that. And now I'm going to go back. I'm going to keep a little bit of that white on there, not too much though. And I'm going to make kind of a more earthy green. So I'm taking some of that blue here, the cerulean, mixing it with this yellow, not the yellow, but the burnt sienna. And now I'm going to take it with some of that ochre. Maybe add a little bit of this blue. I'm very much a kind of figure the color out as you go kind of painter. I do have set formulas, but they're kind of in my brain and not like, I don't have a book that I refer to. So I'm just trying to match the colors that are going to go on this sort of darker ridge of this green. So, and really separate this. So just sort of forming that edge. Well, it looks pretty good. Maybe a tiny bit more water. I think the color is right, but the value probably needs to be a little bit lighter. And when you do that in watercolor, you generally add less pigment, more water. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. And again, working around the different shapes that don't have water on them, sort of get that nice hard edge. Put a little bit of this green in through here. But you notice I'm also keeping little slivers of white open. That's a nice watercolor gouache trick that you can use to let the paper, and I'm letting some of this bleed into what I've already got, because it's not super defined. Adding a little bit more yellow in spots. Let's see here. There we go. Maybe get that a little greener, so I'll add more blue to it. Add some brown because I don't want it to be a bright blue. Generally, your most intense colors in a painting like this, where you've got some deep space, your most intense colors are going to be in the foreground. So I'm really trying to, as tempting as I am, as tempting as it is to come in here and use really kind of bright Henry Matisse colors, I am trying to maintain a semblance of what's going on. I mean, I sort of contradicted myself a little bit, and then I said, do what makes it work for the painting, but I am trying to work in a semi-realistic fashion. So I am trying to be faithful to that idea a little bit, while simultaneously leaving my mark on it.
Hey,
All
Mike,
right.
is it possible if you can zoom out just a tad so we can see the mixing of the palette?
Oh, yeah. There we go. Oop, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, if you ever see me doing that, because I'm looking at kind of my own screen, so I don't often see everything that you're seeing. So let me know.
Both angles are great. Like the close-up really gets you to see the lines, and then it's also nice to see the palette.
Good.
Thanks.
I'm just working up. I think that's looking pretty good. So just working that around these more earthy tones that I've established. But also, I'm not really I'm in the sort of the far middle ground, I guess you could say, with this. I'm not in the foreground yet. So I'm really trying to kind of hold back, the tendency to, it's just like, let's just make this the most amazing, brilliant color ever. I'm Henri Matisse, and I want to make pure yellows and pure reds. Nothing wrong with Matisse. I love Matisse, but we're not really going for that in this particular case. All right. So the water's kind of moving it around, giving it a little bit of built-in texture. Let me see how that looks on the screen there. Oh, yeah, that looks pretty good. I've been there. All right. So let's see. All right, this color here is actually a really good color to kind of come over to this tree. So that's what I'm going to do next. This is a nice sort of almost foreground to middle ground element. So let's establish that. And I'm going to do it in a tone that's about like this, but it's going to get a lot darker eventually. I'm just going to start with the light, and I think that'll probably be a good place to end for today. Maybe get a few shadows down the street if we have time. So I'm just mixing up kind of a nice pool of blue here, and then maybe we're going to make it a little bit more brilliant. So I'll add some of this yellow instead of just going with the earthy yellow ochre. And then I'll throw some of that in. So let's see. I think that's a good mix. So both blues, a little bit of the intense lemon yellow, and then more of the earthy yellow ochre, and then a little bit of this burnt sienna. And that seems pretty good. So all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to sort of texturally build up this big pine tree. And this is all, I would not do this if this were still really wet. So I'm really just, this is a matter of timing. or just kind of blotching it in like this. You know, a lot of people like to go blip, blip, plop, 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 plop like that. That works fine, but it can get a little predictable as far as the mark making goes. So it's a good idea to just kind of try different things, go in different angles, just kind of lay it in, just sort of surprise yourself with a mark here and there, you know, kind of go like that a little bit and then do the blotting and maybe do some straight lines, some of those branches coming out. Notice the way the branches are going. A lot of people, when they draw a tree, they'll draw it like this. And there are some pine trees that are like that, but not this one. So we're going to try and be a little bit consistent with what the natural form of that tree is telling us. I'll get some more of this. So this is just sort of the first run at this, the first pass. And this is going to come almost right to the top of that. I need to make this tree bigger. That can be done. I'll just bring it down to here. So you can see my drawing is sort of in flux. I'm just making some adjustments on the fly. That's totally normal. And we'll just go around this little apartment building. Sort of build that up. Just trying to get kind of the main forms down. And you notice what I'm not doing, hopefully. One of the things I'm not doing is I'm not going in and fussing with a lot of details right now. I'm just trying to kind of, I mean, the only time I really went in with any kind of details is in through here. And that was more just to show you kind of what you can do with a more of an opaque gouache wash. So really resist the urge to kind of go in there and get all that stuff. You'll have plenty of time to do that. And you can always prioritize it later. But in the beginning stages, you really want to just sort of establish big shapes, big ideas, big areas. All right, so from here, I think what I'm going to do, there's a lot of these kind of blue shadows, like this blue along the edge here. I'm going to start plugging some of those in. And we're kind of going to go back to that original blue gray that we had in the beginning. So I'm just going to take this blue here, throw some of that black in, and just establish, actually what I might do first off is get the street color on, like this right through here. So I'm just going to take black and really just dilute it out a little bit. Maybe kind of warm it up a little bit with a little bit of the sienna. All right, let's see how that works. Dilute it with a little bit more water. Oh yeah. So this is black with a little bit of sienna, and I'm just going to come in here and pave the street. We're moving out of the 19th century, paving these roads, taking San Francisco into the 20th century. All right. This is a very light wash. I'm not pre-wetting anything. I just want to kind of lay in a color here. There's a little bit more of this elsewhere, but I'm just going to stick with it. Lots of water. Not lots of water on the paper necessarily, but lots of water when I'm mixing it to get that really light color. There we go.
Hey,
That's
Mike.
better. Yeah.
Does gouache paint lighten up in color once dried, like that of watercolor, or what?
Yeah, it does. And one of the other big changes or differences is gouache dries in kind of a matte finish. So it's really flat. So you do lose a little bit of the depth and you do lose a little bit of the sheen from the water. So yeah, that's a really good question because it does kind of affect the final painting when you're at that stage. Okay, I'm gonna let this, there's a lot of trees and stuff in here. I think I'm gonna come over that with opaque areas. So I think what I'm gonna do with this gray, I'm gonna blue it up and just think about kind of these shadows here, like the shadows along this edge, along here. And I'm just gonna start maybe laying a few of those in. Maybe I'll just run it along this edge here, just to sort of establish a little bit of, you know, sort of the tonality. Like it's definitely darker on this side of the street. I'm just going to kind of build that up a little bit. There's a little tree in there. I'll move around that. Yeah, let's see here. Strip come across there. And just maybe as a reference, I'll just put some of this overall gray in different areas where I see it kind of creeping through. Just to start, I mean, see, there's kind of a nice line right through here of different little building edges. I'm gonna get my glasses on for that. Oh, we're almost done. Okay. So this is where you could come in and you could do some more drawing, and this might not actually be a bad idea. I'm just going to try and wing it here since we only have 2 hours. So I'm just going to do this probably for another 20 minutes, just sort of establish some of these shapes to kind of get the idea. And you see how this is all what's called a 1-point perspective. So everything is kind of retreating back in space and eventually going to meet at 1 point, and then it sort of comes out from that. So it's all going down here. So everything, like this one's very much more of an extreme one. This is almost straight up and down. This one is going to kind of be in between. So it's going to go at a slant like this, but not as much of a slant like that, and more than this one. So it's kind of working our way from here kind of out to there. If you see that, that's probably a street right down there up this way, like a sort of a small alleyway or something like that. And so it just carries your eye down that alleyway, and it creates these little shadows. And that's another sort of piece of the puzzle as it retreats back. So I'm going to work on this for a little bit. There's another one, sort of even a secondary one, where I'm just going to start pulling some of that down, not worrying about, you know, there's a subtle little blue here, and then there's a red roof over here. I'm not worrying about any of that just yet. I really want to get kind of the structure of the street established a little bit more. And, you know, you can be as detailed with all this as you want, or a little bit more impressionistic about it. I'm going to try and sort of thread the needle and do a little bit of both. And I'll fiddle with this for a little while, just sort of working these shadows in down in the more secondary streets. Okay, we're pretty much at our time, so let me get us back. Okay, so next week, to be continued, we will pick this up where we left off. I may do a little bit more. I will do a little bit more between now and then. But not too much more. And I really want to show you kind of laying in those heavy opaque passages, and then probably ending with some of the work with pen. I want to do some work in pen. That was one of the things that I mentioned here. This is just a set of Staedtler pens. They're just fine point. Micron pens are another good one that you can find out there. So feel free to round some of those up. I mean, you could probably even get away with a ballpoint pen, although that's a little bit heavy-handed. So maybe do a little search for these small pens. Let's see what the size. This is a 0.01. They come in a variety of sizes. This is really small. It goes all the way up to like, you know, almost Sharpie marker size, but this is good. This is pretty small. 0.05 is also a good one. Okay. Any parting questions before we head out?
There was one question, Mike.
Yep.
Lots of praise that this was a great class. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Glad to hear it.
Gouache over soft pastel, acrylic, or oil, obviously when it's dry.
Soft pastel for sure. Once everything's dry would work fine. Acrylic would probably work fine. You have to remember that you're working on paper. So acrylic would be fine. I would not use oil over this. You would probably have to treat the whole thing with, you know, some sort of, you know, gel medium or whatever. But acrylic should be fine. Watercolor for sure would be fine. Pastel, yes. I just wouldn't do oil because oil will ruin the paper, and in very short order. So yeah, that's the only one that I would sort of avoid. But yeah, those are all good questions.
I see some people are holding up their paintings.
Yeah. Do we want to have a quick look, a little
Yeah,
show and tell action?
I'm going to spotlight Kylie's. Wow.
Okay. Oh yeah. Yep. There we go.
Let's
Good.
go Sarah's.
Yep. Nicely done, Sarah. All right. You got everything in there. NYECT. Oh yeah, that looks great.
We have Sherry here.
Sherry, yep, very nice. Got those different blues in the background separated from each other. So that was one of the important things today. Good. Yes, Cindy, you worked with much heavier pigment, which works great. You can work gouache like acrylic. You can really just do really heavy paints. I was sort of doing a mixture between kind of watercolor approach and acrylic. All right. Anything else? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was great. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. I always like to give a little bit more time on the 2-week ones. So this is always one that I'm looking forward to. So bring them next week, and I hope to see you there. And great job. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
all right. We'll
Mike.
see you next
Thanks,
week.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.